A mysterious mark on her neck made the CEO jealous and exposed hidden feelings. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us go back to our main character. She stepped out of the car and into the cold evening air, the sound of polished shoes and low conversations drifting through the marble entrance behind her. The building was familiar by now. Too familiar. Every chandelier, every reflective surface, every watchful glance from people who knew she did not truly belong here. She adjusted her coat, just slightly too late. The light caught it first. Not her face, not her eyes. The faint, unmistakable mark just below her jawline. It was small. Almost nothing. A soft shadow against her skin. The kind of detail most people would never notice. But he did. The CEO stopped mid-step. His name was Alexander Reed, 41 years old, self-made billionaire. A man known for control, precision, and emotional restraint. A man who did not believe in coincidence, and certainly did not believe in feelings that could not be measured or managed. And yet, his gaze locked onto her neck, as if something inside him had snapped tight. His jaw clenched. She felt it before she saw it, that shift in the air, the sudden weight of his attention, the silence that followed him wherever he stood. "What is that?" he asked. His voice was low, calm, too calm. She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive, close enough to make her instinctively straighten her posture. His eyes never left that spot on her skin. "Your neck," he said. "Who did that?" The question landed wrong, too sharp, too personal. She froze. For a split second, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, not fear, defensiveness. "That is none of your business," she said carefully. Around them, the gala continued. Glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell. Investors and board members moved in practiced circles, unaware that something fragile was cracking just beneath the surface. Alexander's hand curled slowly at his side. None of his business. The words echoed louder than they should have. This was a contract marriage, a signed agreement, clear terms, clear boundaries, no feelings, no claims, no questions about each other's private lives. And yet his chest tightened, hot and irrational. "You are my wife," he said quietly. Her eyes lifted, sharp now. On paper. The reminder cut deeper than he expected. She took a step back, putting space between them. Between whatever this moment was becoming and what it was supposed to be. Her voice lowered, controlled, the same tone she always used when she reminded him of the rules. "We agreed not to cross lines," she said. "You do not get to interrogate me." Alexander held her gaze, and for the first time since this arrangement began, he realized something unsettling. This was not irritation. This was not curiosity. This was jealousy. Pure, ugly, undeniable jealousy. The thought that someone else had touched her, hurt her, or claimed a part of her life he was not allowed to see made his blood run cold. And the worst part was not that he felt it. The worst part was that he could not hide it. Across the room, someone called his name, a board member, a reminder of the role he was supposed to play tonight. Alexander did not look away from her. "After this," he said, his voice tight, restrained by years of discipline, "we are going to talk." She met his stare, unflinching. "No," she replied softly. "You are." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone under the lights, staring after her, his perfect composure fractured by a single, mysterious mark and the feelings it had dragged to the surface. The drive back was silent. City lights slid across the windows of the black sedan as it moved through downtown, reflections stretching and breaking like unfinished thoughts. She sat straight in her seat, hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze fixed forward. Alexander sat beside her, his posture rigid, his attention split between the road ahead and the presence he could no longer ignore. This was supposed to be simple. That was what the lawyers had promised, what the documents had spelled out in clean, unforgiving language. A contractual marriage, 12 months, clear expectations, mutual benefit. For Alexander Reed, it meant stability, a respectable public image to calm investors. A married man at the helm of a multi-billion-dollar company looked grounded, trustworthy, predictable. It was a requirement whispered by board members and written between the lines of shareholder meetings. For her, it meant survival, a lump sum that erased debt she could not outrun, legal protection she desperately needed, a chance to breathe without fear that one mistake would cost her everything. No romance, no intimacy, no emotional claims. At least, that was the agreement. The car stopped in front of the penthouse. The doorman opened the door, nodding politely, his eyes flicking between them with the quiet curiosity reserved for people who were famous and carefully distant. They stepped inside. The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. The soft hum filled the space between them, pressing against the silence neither of them seemed willing to break. When the doors opened, she walked ahead, slipping off her coat as she crossed the living room. The city sprawled beyond the glass walls, endless and indifferent. Alexander watched her from a few feet away. This woman was not part of his world, not really. She did not come from money. She did not move through rooms like she belonged there. She had been honest about that from the beginning. "I am not what you need," she had said during their first meeting, "but I can pretend to be." And he had agreed, because pretending was something he excelled at. He loosened his tie, the knot suddenly suffocating. "We need to clarify something," he said finally. She turned slowly. "About the rules?" she asked. "I thought those were already clear." "They were," he replied, "until tonight." Her expression hardened, defensive but controlled. "Nothing about tonight changes the contract." Alexander took a breath. He was not used to explaining himself. He was used to issuing statements, to closing discussions before they became uncomfortable. And yet, here he was. "This arrangement exists because we both need something," he said. "But appearances matter. Perception matters. If there is something that could damage that," she cut him off. "You do not get to manage my life." "I am not trying to," he said, though the words sounded weak even to him. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint tension in her jaw. "You hired me to play a role," she continued. "I show up, I smile, I stand beside you when it matters. That is it. You do not own the parts of me that exist outside that role." There it was, the line she had drawn from the start. Alexander nodded slowly, even as something inside him resisted. "Then understand this," he said. "Anything that creates questions, anything that invites speculation, affects both of us." Her voice softened, just slightly. "Then trust me." The word lingered between them. Trust was not something Alexander gave easily. Trust required surrendering control, and control had built his empire. He turned away, moving toward the windows. The city spread beneath him like a map he had already conquered. "Tomorrow morning," he said, his voice measured again, professional. "We have a meeting with my parents. They are old-fashioned. They will watch everything." She exhaled slowly. "I know the routine." "Good," he said. "Because whatever this is," he gestured vaguely, not turning around, "it cannot interfere." She did not respond right away. When she did, her voice was calm, too calm. "It will not," she said. "I never forget why I am here." The words should have reassured him. Instead, they unsettled him. Because for the first time since signing that contract, Alexander Reed realized he was no longer certain that he remembered why he was either. The next morning arrived too quickly. Sunlight crept through the glass walls of the penthouse, pale and unforgiving, casting long lines across the floor. She was already awake, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her blouse with careful precision. The mark was still there, fainter than the night before, but not gone. She tilted her head slightly, studying it, a soft shadow beneath her skin, harmless in reality, dangerous in implication. She reached for a silk scarf from the counter, draping it loosely around her neck. Not to hide it completely, just enough to make it less obvious, less open to interpretation. That was when she heard him. Alexander stood in the doorway, silent, watching her through the mirror. She did not turn right away. She felt his presence the way one feels a shift in pressure before a storm. "You do not have to do that," he said. Her fingers paused on the knot of the scarf. "Do what?" "Cover yourself," he replied. She met his eyes in the reflection. "I am dressing for your parents, not for you." He said nothing. They had rehearsed this meeting. His parents were traditional, influential, and skeptical. They believed marriage was a reflection of character, and character was currency. Every gesture mattered. Every glance would be measured. She had learned quickly how to play her part. Downstairs, the car waited. During the drive, Alexander reviewed talking points on his tablet, his voice steady, his tone detached. She listened, nodded at the right moments, responded with practiced ease. To anyone watching, they were perfect. But every time she shifted in her seat, every time the scarf slipped just enough to reveal the edge of that mark, Alexander noticed. He told himself it meant nothing, that it was coincidence, that it was irritation at the distraction, not the implication. Still, his jaw tightened. His parents' estate sat just outside the city, a sprawling property framed by tall trees and trimmed hedges. The house itself was old money and quiet authority, the kind of place where expectations were passed down like heirlooms. His mother greeted them first, her eyes sharp, observant. Her father followed, polite but reserved. They embraced. Compliments were exchanged. Small talk flowed. Then his mother leaned in, adjusting the scarf gently, as if by instinct. "You look tired, dear," she said to her. "Is everything all right?" She smiled, smooth and effortless. "Just a long week." Alexander watched closely. His mother's gaze lingered for half a second too long at her neck, then moved on. Breakfast was served on the terrace. Conversation turned to business, then to family. Alexander answered questions with ease. She laughed softly at the right moments, placed her hand on his arm when it was expected. A performance. And yet, every time she touched him, something tightened in his chest. At one point, she excused herself, stepping away to take a call. Alexander followed her with his eyes as she moved toward the garden, the sunlight catching the edge of her scarf. His mother noticed. "You seem distracted," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Do I?" She studied him the way only a parent could. "You care more than you admit." Alexander said nothing. Later, back in the car, the silence returned. She loosened the scarf slightly, exhaling as if releasing tension she had carried all morning. "That went well," she said. "Yes," he replied. "It did." She glanced at him. "You do not sound convinced." He hesitated, then asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" Her expression shifted, guarded, wary. "No," she said, "there is not." He wanted to push, wanted to demand clarity, wanted to erase the images his mind kept forming without permission. Instead, he nodded. That night, alone in his office, Alexander stared at the contract displayed on his screen. Clean lines, clear terms, no room for confusion. And yet one question refused to leave him. Not who she was with, but why the thought of it unsettled him so deeply. Meanwhile, in her room, she removed the scarf and pressed her fingers lightly against the mark, her expression unreadable. Some truths, she knew, were better revealed later, when the cost of misunderstanding would be far greater than the mark itself. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt rehearsed, almost believable. Mornings began with quiet coordination, shared schedules, brief exchanges over coffee that was always brewed exactly the way Alexander liked it. She learned quickly which meetings mattered, which names carried weight, which smiles needed to last a second longer than felt natural. They arrived together. They left together. To the outside world, they were seamless. At the office, employees greeted her with polite curiosity that slowly shifted into respect. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, her words were careful, measured, never overstepping. Alexander noticed how easily she adapted, how she read a room without trying to dominate it. It unsettled him more than he expected. At lunches with executives, she played her role flawlessly. She asked about families, remembered names, laughed at jokes that were not particularly funny. She touched his arm lightly when cameras appeared, the gesture subtle, but effective. Each time she did, his focus slipped. He told himself it was habit, conditioning, the result of weeks spent maintaining a facade. But then came the quiet moments. Late evenings in the penthouse, when the city lights blurred beyond the windows and the performance ended. She would retreat to one side of the living space, laptop open, notes spread neatly across the table. He would sit across the room, reviewing reports, pretending not to watch her. They rarely spoke then. When they did, it was practical. "There is a dinner Thursday," he would say. "I will be ready," she replied. No arguments, no intimacy. And yet, Alexander found himself noticing details he had no reason to notice. The way she rubbed her wrist when she was tired. The way she paused before answering questions that felt too personal. The way she avoided mirrors when the light was too bright. And always, the scarf. Different colors, different fabrics, always present. One evening, as they prepared to leave for another event, She reached for a necklace instead. Thin, elegant, designed to rest just above the collarbone. Alexander watched from the doorway. For a moment, the mark was visible again. His chest tightened. "You should wear the scarf," he said. She looked up, surprised. "Why?" "It suits the occasion," he replied too quickly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Or does it suit your comfort?" The question caught him off guard. "I am thinking about optics," he said. She turned fully toward him now. "No, you were thinking about control." Silence stretched between them. She reached for the scarf anyway, looping it around her neck with deliberate calm. "Do not confuse the two," she added. At the event, the tension followed them. A charity gala this time. Bright lights, cameras, soft music beneath layers of conversation. Alexander spoke on stage, his voice confident, practiced. Applause followed. When he returned to her side, she smiled up at him, composed and supportive. But when a donor leaned in too close, when another man laughed too easily at her words, Alexander felt something sharp twist inside him. He found reasons to keep her near. A hand at her back, a quiet comment meant only for her. "You are crowding me," she whispered at one point. "People are watching," he replied. "So are you," she said. Later that night, back in the car, the city rushing past in streaks of light, she finally spoke. "You are breaking the rules," she said. He did not deny it. "This arrangement was supposed to be clean," she continued. "Simple. You are making it complicated." Alexander stared ahead. "I am adapting." "No," she said softly. "You are reacting." The word struck deeper than she knew, because reacting meant emotion, and emotion was never part of the contract. When they reached the penthouse, she stepped out of the car without another word. Alexander remained seated for a moment longer, his hands resting on his knees, his mind replaying every glance, every unspoken question. This was supposed to be pretend, so why did it feel like something real was beginning to demand space? Upstairs, she removed the scarf and set it carefully on the dresser. The mark beneath it was almost gone now, but the tension it had created lingered, heavier than ever, and neither of them knew how to put it back where it belonged. The night everything shifted arrived disguised as another obligation. A black-tie charity gala at the downtown museum, high-profile donors, press, cameras waiting at the entrance, flashes sharp enough to feel like interrogation lights. This was not optional. This was the kind of event where absence spoke louder than presence. Alexander arrived first, stepping out of the car with practiced confidence. He shook hands, exchanged brief words, allowed himself to be photographed. The role fit him like a tailored suit. Then she arrived. Heads turned. Not because she was trying to draw attention, but because she never had to. The dress was elegant without being loud, the kind that suggested restraint rather than display. Her hair was pulled back, exposing her neck. No scarf. Alexander felt it before he saw it clearly. That familiar tightening in his chest. The mark was almost gone now, barely there. A pale shadow that most people would miss entirely. He did not. She stepped beside him, offering her arm. "Smile," she murmured. "They are watching." He did, barely. Inside, the room buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. Names Alexander recognized drifted toward them. Donors, board members, reporters. Everything followed script, until it did not. A man approached them mid-conversation, confident, too familiar. He greeted her first, his smile lingering a second longer than necessary. "It is good to see you again," the man said warmly. She smiled politely. "Likewise." Alexander noticed the way the man's gaze dipped, just briefly, to her neck. Something cold settled in Alexander's stomach. "How do you know each other?" Alexander asked, his voice smooth, his expression unchanged. The man laughed lightly. "We met recently, briefly." She shifted slightly, uncomfortable. "Alexander." But he was already watching the man, reading posture, tone, intent. 1,000 negotiations had trained him to detect threat. The man raised an eyebrow. "I did not realize I was interrupting." "You are not," Alexander said too quickly. "My wife was just telling me about you." The word wife landed heavy. She looked at him, surprised. The man smiled, unfazed. "Then I am glad to meet you properly." He extended his hand. Alexander shook it, his grip firm, controlled. The conversation continued, but something had changed. Alexander found himself standing closer to her, his hand resting at the small of her back. protective, possessive. She stiffened. When the man finally excused himself, she turned to Alexander immediately. "What was that?" she asked under her breath. "Nothing," he replied. "That was not nothing." People passed by, voices overlapping, eyes occasionally glancing their way. This was not the place for confrontation, but tension pressed against the space between them. "You are acting like I did something wrong," she said quietly. He lowered his voice. "You let him look at you like that." Her eyes flashed. "I did not let anything happen." "And yet he knew you," Alexander replied. "Well enough to notice." She inhaled sharply. "You are crossing a line." "Am I?" he asked. They stood there, perfectly composed on the surface, unraveling beneath it. A reporter approached, microphone in hand. "Alexander, could we get a quick comment about your foundation work this year?" He turned instantly, the mask sliding back into place. He spoke confidently, eloquently, gesturing toward her when appropriate. "My wife has been instrumental," he said. "Her insight has been invaluable." The words surprised even him. She stared at him, stunned, before forcing a smile for the cameras. Applause followed. Polite laughter. Approval. But when they stepped away, her voice dropped to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "You are using me." He met her gaze. "You agreed to be used." "For appearances," she said. "Not for your jealousy." The accusation hit its mark. Jealousy. He did not deny it. Later, in a quiet corner near the balcony, the tension finally broke. "Who was he?" Alexander asked. She crossed her arms. "That is none of your business. I deserve to know." "No," she replied. "You do not." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Alexander said the one thing he should not have. "Did he do that to you?" Her face went still. "What?" she asked. "The mark," he said, "on your neck." The silence that followed was absolute. Her eyes hardened, and in them he saw not guilt, not shame, but hurt. "How dare you?" she said softly. She turned and walked away, leaving Alexander standing alone amid the quiet hum of the gala, surrounded by people and suddenly more isolated than he had been in years. For the first time he realized he might have damaged something fragile. Not the contract, but the trust holding it together. She did not return to his side that night. Alexander searched for her briefly, scanning the edges of the room, the balcony, the quiet corners where conversations softened into whispers. She was gone, not just physically, but deliberately. The drive home felt endless. When he entered the penthouse, the lights were dimmed, the space quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Her heels were not by the door. Her bag was gone. The guest room light was off. She had retreated behind the only boundary she still controlled. Alexander loosened his jacket and set it aside, his movements slower now, heavier. The echo of her words replayed in his mind. "How dare you?" He had crossed a line, not because of jealousy, not because of the contract, but because he had assumed something about her that stripped her of dignity. He spent the night in his office, staring at documents he did not read, replaying every moment from the gala. The way she had stiffened when he touched her back, the look in her eyes when he asked about the mark. There had been pain there, not guilt. By morning, sleep had abandoned him entirely. She did not join him for breakfast. Hours passed. Meetings came and went. His assistant noticed his distraction but said nothing. The entire day felt off balance, as though one missing piece had thrown everything else into question. That evening she finally returned. Alexander heard the door before he saw her. He stood near the windows, watching her reflection as she entered the living room. She looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally. "We need to talk," he said quietly. She stopped but did not turn around. "No," she replied. "You need to listen." He nodded once. She faced him now, her expression composed but distant. "You humiliated me," she said. "Not in front of them, in front of myself." "That was not my intention," he said. "That does not matter," she replied. "Impact does." She took a breath, steadying herself. "You asked who did that to me," she continued. "You assumed something without knowing anything. You saw a mark and decided it meant I belonged to someone else." Alexander lowered his gaze. "That mark," she said, "came from an accident, weeks ago. I slipped on the stairs in a building that has not been renovated in years. I did not tell you because I did not owe you an explanation." The words landed hard. "I am sorry," he said. The apology felt inadequate even as he spoke it. She shook her head. "You are not sorry you asked. You are sorry you were wrong." He did not deny it. She stepped closer, not in anger now, but in resolve. "This contract only works if there is respect," she said. "Not control, not suspicion. Respect." "I understand," Alexander replied. "Do you?" she asked. "Because tonight I saw something else." She paused. "You are not reacting like a man protecting an agreement," she said. "You are reacting like a man afraid of losing something he never admitted he wanted." The truth of it left him exposed. Alexander exhaled slowly. "I do not know what I am feeling," he said, "but I know I was wrong." Silence settled between them, heavy but no longer hostile. She nodded once. "Then do not make me regret staying." She turned and walked toward her room. Alexander remained where he was, the city lights reflecting across the glass, his own reflection unfamiliar now. The contract still existed, but something else had entered the space between them, something fragile, honest, dangerous. And for the first time, Alexander Reed understood that pretending might cost him more than the truth ever would. The shift came quietly, not with raised voices or dramatic gestures, but with absence. For the first time since the contract was signed, Alexander stopped trying to manage her. He did not ask where she was going in the mornings. He did not comment on what she wore. He did not reach for her arm when cameras appeared. At events, he stood beside her without touching, allowing her space even when instinct told him otherwise. It was restraint, and for a man like Alexander Reed, restraint was effort. She noticed. At first, she assumed it was distance, a cooling off, the natural correction after a line had been crossed. But days passed, and the change held. At a luncheon with investors, a woman made a pointed remark about appearances, eyes flicking to her neck out of habit. Alexander responded smoothly, without hesitation. "My wife does not owe anyone an explanation," he said evenly, "including us." The table went quiet. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her expression softened. That evening, back at the penthouse, she found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, preparing something simple. The sight caught her off guard. "You do not cook," she said. "I am learning," he replied. She leaned against the counter, watching him move with careful focus, as if following instructions he had memorized. "Why?" she asked. Alexander paused, then answered honestly, "Because I realized I have been acting like everything in my life exists to serve a purpose, including you." She said nothing. "I do not want to do that anymore," he continued. "Not to you." The words hung between them. She stepped closer, not crossing the space entirely, but no longer retreating from it. "This does not change the contract," she said quietly. "No," he agreed. "It changes me." The following week brought another test, a board meeting, closed doors, sharp questions. One director raised concerns about distractions, about the optics of personal matters affecting leadership. Alexander listened. Then he spoke. "My marriage is not a liability," he said calmly, "and my wife is not a tool for reassurance. If that is a problem, then the problem is not with her." The room shifted. Later, she heard about it from his assistant, not from him. When she confronted him that night, his response was simple. "You deserve to be defended when you are not in the room." Something settled into place then. The contract still existed, the rules still stood, but the power dynamic had changed. One evening, as they prepared for bed on opposite sides of the penthouse, she stopped in the doorway. "You know," she said, "most men would have demanded proof, evidence, a story they could verify." He met her gaze. "I am not most men." "No," she agreed. "You are learning." She hesitated, then added, "The mark will be gone soon." "I know," he said. She waited, as if expecting something else. He surprised her. "But the way I reacted to it will not be," he said, "and I will carry that longer." Her throat tightened, just slightly. "Good," she replied, "because I need to know that when things become complicated, you do not assume the worst of me." Alexander nodded once. "I will not." That night, for the first time, they sat together without pretense, no performance, no audience, just two people sharing the quiet of a space neither of them had expected to matter. The mark on her neck was fading, but the truth it revealed had already done its work, and neither of them could pretend anymore that this was only an arrangement. The breaking point did not arrive in private. It arrived under crystal lights, in front of people who believed they understood power. The annual board gala was meant to be routine, a celebration of growth, a reassurance to shareholders that everything was stable, controlled, predictable. Alexander had attended it for years without incident. This time was different. She stood beside him as he entered the ballroom, her posture calm, her expression composed. The mark on her neck was gone now, completely faded, nothing left to explain. And yet the tension followed them like a shadow. Alexander sensed it before it surfaced. The subtle shift in tone when conversations paused a second too long. The glances exchanged between board members who believed themselves invisible. Halfway through the evening, the chairman cleared his throat and raised a glass. "A moment," he said with a practiced smile. "Before we continue." Alexander felt her stiffen beside him. "We value transparency," the chairman continued, "especially when leadership choices affect perception. There have been concerns about distractions, about arrangements that appear unconventional." The room grew quiet. Alexander turned toward the speaker, his expression unreadable. "This company was built on discipline," the chairman said, "not emotion." That was when Alexander stepped forward. "There is nothing unconventional about respect," he said calmly, "and there is nothing distracting about integrity." A murmur rippled through the room. "My marriage is not a performance," Alexander continued. "It is not a strategy, and my wife is not here to reassure anyone but herself." He reached for her hand. "Not for cameras, not for effect, for choice. If any of you believe that standing beside someone with dignity weakens leadership," he said, "then you misunderstand what leadership is." Silence followed. Heavy, uncomfortable. She looked at him, stunned. This was not part of the contract. The chairman hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Noted. The evening resumed, but something had shifted irreversibly. Later, on the terrace overlooking the city, she finally spoke. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. "I did," Alexander replied, "because the contract cannot protect you from what I allowed." She searched his face. "You are risking a great deal." He met her gaze. "So are you. Every day you stay." The truth of it settled between them. That night, back at the penthouse, Alexander placed the contract on the table between them. The document that had defined everything. "I am not asking you to tear it up," he said. "I am asking you to choose." She looked at the pages, the clauses, the boundaries that had once felt like safety. "And if I choose to leave?" she asked. "I will accept it," he said, "without retaliation, without conditions." The offer was real and frightening. She took a breath, then reached for the pen. Instead of signing, she drew a single line through one clause, the one that said no emotional involvement. "This ends tonight," she said softly, "not because I am ready for love, but because I refuse to live in half-truths." Alexander nodded. "So do I." They stood there, the city lights reflecting across the glass, the contract altered but not destroyed. The arrangement was over. What remained was something untested, unprotected, and finally, honest. The morning after the contract changed felt unfamiliar. Not dramatic, not heavy. Quiet. Sunlight filled the penthouse, softer than usual, spilling across the floor without urgency. She stood by the window, coffee cooling in her hands, watching the city wake below. For the first time since arriving here, she did not feel like a guest or a performer. She felt present. Alexander joined her a moment later. No suit, no tie, just a simple shirt, sleeves unrolled, his posture unguarded in a way she had never seen before. "We do not have a schedule today," he said. She looked at him. "That has never happened." "I canceled everything," he replied. "For once, the company can wait." She studied him carefully, searching for hesitation. There was none. They sat together at the kitchen table, not across from each other like negotiators, but side by side. Conversation came slowly at first. Simple things, the kind that had never fit into meetings or contracts. Where she grew up, why she left, what she missed. He listened, not as a man evaluating risk, but as someone learning who stood beside him. Later that afternoon, they walked through the city together. No security detail, no cameras, just two people moving through crowds that did not recognize them as anything remarkable. At a crosswalk, she hesitated. Alexander reached for her hand, then stopped himself. She noticed. After a beat, She closed the distance herself, slipping her hand into his. The choice mattered. Weeks passed. The contract was never mentioned again, though it remained folded neatly in a drawer, a reminder of where they began. Their relationship did not change overnight. There were still boundaries to navigate, habits to unlearn. But there was honesty now. At the next public appearance, reporters asked questions about stability, about leadership, about appearances. Alexander answered without rehearsed lines. "My life is not less focused because I chose truth," he said. "It is stronger." She stood beside him, not as a symbol, not as protection, but as a partner. Later that evening, on the balcony overlooking the city, Alexander turned to her. "I never asked you to stay," he said. "Not truly." She met his gaze. "You did not have to." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. Not a ring, not yet. A simple key. "This is not a proposal," he said. "It is an invitation to choose this life with me, on your terms." She held the key, its weight grounding and real. "And if I say no?" she asked. "Then I will still be grateful," he replied, "because you taught me the difference between possession and love." She smiled then, slow and genuine. "I am not saying no," she said. The city hummed around them, endless and alive. The mark on her neck was gone. The jealousy that once consumed him had transformed into something steadier, protective, not possessive, present, not controlling. What began as an arrangement had become a choice, not written on paper, but made every day by two people who finally stopped pretending.